Before I start telling you stories about India, I was thinking today that maybe I should say something about the killing in Newtown, Connecticut, because I came out of these 2 weeks, marvelous 2 weeks of teachings with His Holiness, and then, you know, finally got online when I was in Bangalore, and that's what the headline was. So it was pretty shocking, and in one way there's not a lot to say. It's like it is, and we all go through tragedies, and we go through grieving processes. And this one, of course, is very special because there were children involved. And I think the youth of some of the teachers too, having been a teacher myself in elementary school, and you're in your 20s and starting out, and you really want to help the world through being a teacher. So I think we should also think of the teachers who lost their lives, as well as the principal and the school counselor and others. But to think of grieving in general, and that I once read a definition of grieving, that it's adapting to a change that you didn't want. And I thought that was a really good definition, because we usually think of grieving as sobbing and overwhelming sadness and stuckness in the feeling that you're feeling. Whereas this definition of adjusting to a change that you didn't want seems much better, because it shows that grieving is a process. It's adjusting, and it's also acknowledging that it's something that you didn't want, or something you didn't agree with or expect, or something you found repugnant, or something you just didn't like. But that these situations of on all areas of the spectrum, from I don't like it and I don't expect it to it's horrendous, you know, come at us all through our lives. And so how do we grieve through all these changes that we don't want and didn't expect? Yeah. And I think for me it's important to acknowledge the feelings of sadness that I may feel. Sometimes there may be feelings of anger, although personally speaking I don't tend to go to anger so much. I stay in the sadness, but people are different. Some people, you know, when things happen that they don't want or approve of, get angry about it. But the thing is to acknowledge the emotions, but then to ask ourselves, what am I going to feed and what am I going to not feed? And what seeds in my minds and others' minds do I want to water, and what seeds do I want to not water, you know? And so in the thing of adapting to these kinds of changes, from a Buddhist perspective, is to really see what we can learn from these things, and to see them as indicative of samsaric existence. In other words, we are in samsara, these things are there, there is no way they're not going to be there, because the definition of samsara is existence under the influence of ignorance, anger and attachment, you know, where you're born again and again under the influence of ignorance. So by the very definition of samsara, these things are included in it. So then, as practitioners, we have to ask ourselves, do I want to stay in samsara? In other words, if I want the pleasure of samsara, you know, the disco and the food and the sex and the reputation and getting what I want when I want it, if I want those things, then I'm going to have to accept everything else that comes with it. Do I like the pleasures of samsara enough to accept the tragedies and pain of samsara? If we really sit down and meditate on it, the answer is going to be no. Okay? If we don't sit down and meditate on it, then we want the pleasures of samsara without the disadvantages of samsara. We want samsara and nirvana at the same time, but that's totally impossible. Okay? So that's this weird mental state when we don't really confront what samsaric existence is all about. So then there's no real renunciation, there's just renunciation from our mouth, but actually we want samsaric pleasure. Okay? So we have to really go to really think, you know, what does it mean being born again and again under the influence of ignorance and the karma that's created by it? And am I willing to accept the whole thing or not? And if I'm not, then that's having compassion for myself. That's what renunciation is. It's seeing that I have more potential. There's other experiences I can have in life besides these tragedies of samsara. Okay? And then, of course, taking that a step further to seeing, you know, all the suffering of everybody in these situations, wanting everybody to be free of samsara, and so generating bodhicitta. Okay? And then bodhicitta puts us on a long-term motivation that gives us a lot of stability and courage so that these ups and downs in samsara don't knock us so hard because we are focused on something long-term. Okay? So I think that kind of perspective can help us in the immediate pain that we experience when something like this happens. Okay? On the other hand, you know, some people are going to say, but that's just spacing out into your long-term spiritual something. What about bodhisattvas trying to help people now with the situation? Okay? And here is where I think that as responsible citizens of a country, we have to speak out, you know? And we have to speak out saying, yes, we want more mental health services, and we're willing to pay the taxes that will support them. Okay? And yes, we want to be safe in our own communities, and safety is not a political issue. So gun control should not be seen as a thing of constitutional rights. To me, this is a safety issue, a health issue. You know, can people feel safe and be safe in their own communities? You know? And that's a right to me. I mean, why do you, as any citizen anywhere in the world, safety seems to be the foremost thing that we all need. I mean, we need safety before we need guns, don't we? Don't we? We need safety, we need food, we need shelter, we need clothing, we need medicine. That's the bottom, you know, line. Possessions come later, you know? So let's create a country where people can be safe. And it seems to me that having restrictions on the weapons that are available to the consumer and having better background checks and so on is, you know, one way to go about making this country safe. I was shocked, totally shocked. The New York Times today had a picture of the assault weapon that was used in the murders. And it had a bunch of questions below about, you know, Connecticut laws of, you know, what is required to get this kind of weapon. Yeah. So of course, if you're 18 or older, you can go to a licensed store and you can get a gun. You can't get liquor, you know, but you can get a gun. You can't vote, but you can get a gun. Okay. If you're under age 18, you can go to any private person or gun show and buy a gun. Yeah? It's, you know, as long as there's no reporting, there's no background checks. You can buy guns at private shows. There's no background checks. You know, if the person suspects that you're underage and still sells it to you, they're held responsible, you know, if you do something wrong with it. But if they don't know, and they don't ask, and they don't even have to, you know, send in records of the sale. I mean, it is so easy to get a weapon, even for people under the age of 18, let alone people over the age of 18, at private gun shows with no background checks, zero, zip, nothing. You know, every other thing in this country, you know, we have safety things attached to it. You can't buy cars that don't have certain safety devices, and you have to, you know, have a license and be a certain age and to get the car. And there's no way to do it if you're underage. There's no way where you can go around the back door and get a driver's license, you know, and have your own car if you're not of age. But to get a gun, you can do this. I mean, it's just shocking, the ease with which people can get guns and ammunition. You know? And like I said, to me, this is not a constitutional, apart from the fact that I don't think the founding fathers, you know, meant, if you read the Second Amendment, they certainly didn't mean what's going on now with guns. And I'm sure the founding mothers would have had a totally different take on with the Second Amendment if they had the right to vote, which they didn't then. Maybe we should redo the Constitution and include women's votes in it. Wouldn't that be something? You know, have the Constitution where, you know, blacks and women could vote, and see what parts of the Constitution still held. That just popped into my mind. But aside from that radical idea, you know, yeah, to really say, you know, was this what was meant by the Second Amendment? And you know, what is the right to bear arms? What does that give you that the right to safety doesn't give you? You know, the people who cite this as a constitutional right, what is it that they're really wanting? Is it the power that a gun gives you? Is it the gun, or is it the right? What is it that is so important to those people that we can start a dialogue on, you know? And what about the right to safety? Isn't that a human right? No? And for children to be safe in a school, for people in a shopping mall to be safe going shopping, in a movie theater to be safe, you know? Isn't that, there's no special constitutional right, because I think it's so obvious. You know, that's why the Constitution was written, so that we could live in a safe place. So I think it's also time for us as citizens to speak up, you know, and say we've had enough nice speeches, you know, about needing to do something, and now we need to do something. Both in terms of providing mental health, you know, facilities, and in terms of gun ownership. Yeah. I was also, just to share some thoughts on the issue of mental health, because I think, wasn't there one of these mass killings where a relative did phone the police and say, or maybe it was a terrorist action that was going to happen, and a relative phoned the police and said, I suspect my child, or whoever it is involved in something like this. So I think, you know, that has happened. I think it was a terrorist plan. But I was thinking how difficult it is to contact the police for a relative, you know, about this. How difficult it is emotionally, or even if you have a relative that you suspect as being, you know, mentally unstable, to broach that to that person. Or if it's a child, to broach it to the parents. It's so difficult to say these kinds of things because so often, especially regarding mental health, people say, there's nothing wrong. Yeah, I don't have a problem. Or this isn't a big problem, nothing has happened yet. And so to think of how to discuss concerns like this with family members in situations where nothing happened, where you're not accusing somebody of doing something that of course hasn't even been done yet. Yeah, I think this is a question we need some guidance on, you know, how to do that. But my big hope is that from this tragedy, again, we all look inside and say, what can I do to prevent it? You know, not only in a social way or as in terms of being a citizen of a country, but this kind of tragedy comes from ignorance, doesn't it? And it comes from anger. So what can I do about my ignorance? What can I do about my anger? Because even in this life, if I don't do this kind of thing, if I have the seeds of ignorance and anger in my mind stream, I'm not totally safe in future lives from doing this. Yeah? So what can I do to protect my own mind from afflictions so that my afflictions don't cause pain to other living beings, either this lifetime or future lifetimes, as well as, you know, the pain that the afflictions cause to ourselves personally. So anyway, I think there's a lot to look in here and a lot to digest and to think about. Yeah. Yeah.
Adam Lanza's aunt was interviewed, and she said something along the lines that guns don't kill, but people do.
Oh yes, this thing. Yeah. So this argument that the NRA used, that guns don't kill, people kill. So by that account, it's the same, there was no gun involved in the murders. Yeah, there was no gun. Guns don't kill. So there was no guns. It was just a person who killed. Now, that isn't true. There were obviously guns. If the guns weren't there and that murderer had to kill people, let's say by a knife or by strangulation, would he have been able to kill as many people as he killed? No. Somebody would have tackled him, somebody would have taken the knife away, somebody would have done something. In fact, if he only had a knife, he wouldn't have even been able to get into the school, because the Lanza shot through the glass and barged his way into the school. He was not buzzed into the school. Somebody with a knife could not have gotten into that school. Somebody with a gun could have. You can't say guns don't kill people. Guns do kill people. And guns give somebody who wants to kill the ability to kill in numbers and in velocity that a knife or, you know, a stick or whatever would not give that person. Yeah? And the fact that he had so much, they haven't counted yet, but he had tons more ammunition that was not used, that he would have used if the police had not arrived as quickly and he hadn't killed himself so quickly. You know, so there would have been more people dead. And these ways that you can just so quickly reload. And, you know, in the murder in Tucson, the time when they tackled the guy was when he was reloading. But they had to wait until he had dispensed his whole magazine until being able to do that. Yeah. And then the thing, some gun people say, but if everybody had a gun, then we would be safer. So that means that when this guy is going through the hallways and there's children all around, that a teacher is going to take out a gun and kill him when there's children all the way around, and she's going to be able to hit just the gunman without injuring anybody else? Or in the crowded theater, that when there's this chaos of the shooting going on, that somebody who has a gun is going to be able to stand up and identify the first man who's shooting and kill him. And then, of course, somebody else is going to think it was a conspiracy and he was one of the gunmen, so somebody else is going to turn around and kill him. And you're going to have many people shooting at many people in a public space. Yeah? Does that make things safer for everybody to have a gun? I don't think so. I read an article by somebody who was a soldier in Afghanistan, I believe it was, or Iraq. I think it was Afghanistan. And he was a highly trained soldier, you know, with these weapons. And he said that he did not agree with citizens being able to carry these weapons, concealed or unconcealed, you know, civilians having these, because he said the precision that you need to have to know who to shoot, and in a chaotic situation, like, you know, with a school or a theater or a shopping mall, you have no idea who to shoot and where they are. And he said it would wind up with many more people dead. Yeah. So it's strange the way the NRA, you know, if they say it's not guns that kill people, it's people that do, so that means we should outlaw people. Yeah?
Trying to put everybody in jail.
Yeah. I mean, it really doesn't make much sense. I think there's one big fact, I mean, I think there's this power factor that giving a gun has. But even, you know, people who are hunters and so on, they recognize the need for safety, you know, because they're out in the wilderness and they know they can get shot by some hunter who is not safe, yeah, or who has wrong kind of weapons. So I think hunters have some, you know, awareness of safety, and they care about that. So I think somehow it's the power, but also it's the money that people make from selling guns. There is a tremendous amount of money made in marketing. Aside from the fact that our country is the leading weapons exporter, you know, just among the citizens here, how many people make their livelihood through selling weapons and making weapons? There's a lot of money to be made. You know, I was very impressed this morning also. There was one investment company that decided to sell their stock in some big gun company after this. I thought, good for them. Yeah. I don't know all the reasons behind that decision, but just the fact that they did it, they're saying something. Yeah. So I think too, it's something for investors to look at. Are we going to invest in these kind of businesses? Mm-hmm.